What's going on, everybody? It's Bobby with Speed Freaks Performance. Welcome back to the channel. Today, again, we got the 2019 Dodge Challenger Scat Pack Widebody. We're going to be installing the Eibach Sport Line springs along with the Eibach rear camber bushings. First things first, we went ahead and disconnected the battery. Went ahead and got the car up in the air. Next step will be removing the wheels. All right, now we can show you what parts we got. So we got the Eibach Sport Lines, and then we also got the rear bushings. Upon doing some research, it looks like the bushings will be set to 1.5 positive to compensate for the drop of the springs, which should set it to about 0 as far as the camber in the rear. See, the bushings are here and here as well. So the back's pretty simple and straightforward. Dropping down the lower control arm, pulling the spring out, and then replacing the bushings there and there. As for the front, again, pretty simple and straightforward. Upper control arm, drop the suspension, pull the spring out. Use a spring compressor, compress the spring, install a new spring on the factory strut. So we're gonna go ahead and do a step-by-step installation of these springs. First, what I went ahead and did was these panel clips. Went ahead and pulled both of those out, and you're able to access the connector right back there. Went ahead and disconnected it from its location. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the upper bolt on the sway bar using a 13/16. So we'll go ahead and get that out now. Now what you can go ahead and do is break the nut on the upper control arm loose using an 18mm. And make sure it stays in there so that way you give it a blow and it comes off of the ball joint. At this time, what you can go ahead and do, take a piece of wire, whether you use a strap or a piece of wire or anything, just to go ahead and support the knuckle. You can go ahead and tie it up, just tie it up to the upper control arm, just so it's up out of the way. Just so you don't put added stress on the brake lines or any of the electrical lines or anything like that. Just to keep it from falling at you, that way you don't stress these lines. So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and remove the strut assembly. So we'll go ahead and tackle that now. Now that you have the 18mm bolt removed from the bottom of the strut, what you can do is you have 3 13mm nuts at the top. So we'll go ahead and remove those and pull the strut out. All as one big piece. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do is compress this spring, install the new spring. Got you next. All right, next what you wanna go ahead and do is Grab your spring compressor tool. Go ahead and set this up. Just be careful with this line. You don't want to damage it or break it in any way. And once you have, you feel the spring release, you can go ahead and take the nut off the strut, pull the top pad off, and install the new spring. All right, now the next step, after you have the spring compressor tightened down, what you can go ahead and do is grab an 18 millimeter on an impact. You can go ahead and back this top nut. What you can go ahead and do now is remove the top pad. A lot of the time the protector comes out with it. And then you can go ahead and remove the old spring. All right, now the next step, go ahead and just check the orientation, clean all this out if you need to. Go ahead and set the new spring in, set the top pad, get it back installed. All right, now that you've gone ahead and reinstalled the spring, again, remember the orientation, how it came out, and then where your top 3 studs come through. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do, keeping the spring in the right orientation, we're gonna go ahead and lock down the top nut on the strut. Now what you want to do is just go ahead and make sure that nut's seated, make sure everything's nice and tight, and throw it back in the car. All right, now that you have everything reassembled, what you can go ahead and do is put it back. Now what you can go ahead and do is reinstall the upper control arm on the spindle. Removing whatever wire or strap you used to hold. Right. Now what you're going to do is go ahead and repeat the same step on the other side. All right, now that you've reinstalled the 3 nuts at the top, went ahead and put the cover back on. Go ahead and tighten the lower shock bolt. Tighten the upper control arm to the spindle, and then reinstall your sway bar end link. All right, now that you got everything back together, everything's torqued down, what you're gonna wanna do is, last but not least, remember to re-plug in the active suspension if your vehicle is equipped with it, as well as reinstall your panel clips. Reinstall the wheel, and the front's done. Next, onto the back. You moved on to the back. What you're gonna wanna do is this lower cradle that holds the spring in, what you're gonna wanna do is you have a bolt here, but as you can see, you don't have much clearance between the exhaust. So what you're gonna wanna do is there's a 13 millimeter bolt there, and right up in there, what you're gonna wanna do is back those out and drop those down so the exhaust hangs a little bit lower so that you can get this bolt out. And you're also going to take the bolt out of the lower strut mount. That way you can have enough clearance to pull the spring out. that you've removed those, you can get the exhaust to hang down where you need it to be. Go ahead and take care of that on both sides. All right, the next step, go ahead and remove the bolt that holds the strut on the cradle. This is a 18mm nut, a 15mm on bolt. You're gonna go ahead and take care of that on both sides. A bit more clearance, it may be necessary to drop the mount off of this hanger. So you can go ahead and do that. Let's see if you can see it. I'm gonna go ahead and remove those just to get the exhaust to drop just a little bit more. All right, now that you have the exhaust dropped down, as you can see, you have plenty of room to back those bolts out. So next thing we'll do is we'll lower it down, put a jack stand underneath the cradle or a floor jack underneath the cradle. Go ahead and put some tension on it, back that bolt out, lower the cradle down and pull the spring out. Now what you can go ahead and do with your floor jack in place, supporting the cradle, you have a 15mm bolt and an 18mm nut. Gonna go ahead and pull that out and then very carefully drop down the cradle. Jack, as you can see, the cradle is no longer attached. What you can do is go ahead and reach in here, wiggle your spring out of the mount. Like that, she's out. All right, now what you can go ahead and do is reinstall the new spring, making sure to check the orientation of the spring, make sure it seats both lower and upper mounts. Your springs in on both sides. Same step, both sides. What we can go ahead and do is jack this up, go ahead and remount the spring, the shock, and then that's the installation of lowering springs. But as said in the beginning of the video, what we're gonna do is the camber bushings. So we'll get the rest of it back together, get it dropped down a little bit, and then we'll do step by step in replacing the camber bushings. All right, now next up on the agenda is to replace the rear camber bushings. These are the ones we got from Eibach, 2 for each side, detailed instructions. So now what you're gonna do, you're gonna go ahead and we'll start with the top one. And there's the other one right there. We'll go ahead and unbolt that, lift the arm up out of the way and press the bushing out. All right, using an 18mm, we're gonna go ahead and remove. Went ahead and got a ball joint service kit. Has different dies, C-clamp that we'll be using to push out the bushing. The orientation of the bushing, it gives you a breakdown in the instructions to show you the degree based on collected information, and have lowered a few of these Chargers and Challengers. With the Eibach Sport Lines, we'll be doing 1.5 degrees positive to compensate for the drop. So as you can see, it shows you the factory one on the inside and then the orientation that you'll put the new one with the lobe being out. So we'll go ahead and push these bushings out and get the new one set in. After you have the tool set up, what you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and grab a socket. Sure exactly what size it is. That is a 22mm. Go ahead and put it on the end. grab a ratchet. What you do is you're gonna go ahead and start pushing that bushing out. All right, we'll go ahead and show you a detailed view of how we set the tool up to push out these bushings. All right, so you have your tool, you have your back piece, you have the top piece here, and then you have your collar. So we'll go ahead and get that set up. And it'll look just like that. And what you can do is you can go ahead and put it on there. Make sure that doesn't happen. And that'll flatten out, so you back it off. Now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and remove this back die. Okay. Now there's also, since we're not going to be reusing these bushings, what you can go ahead and do is push right on the center. Now that you have worked it through slightly, go ahead and grab your ratchet. And finish pushing the bushing through. Pop. Go ahead and back it out. Remove the tool. And the bushing has been pushed out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab the new one. Again, we're setting this at 1.5 positive, so the lobe will be outmost. What I went ahead and did is I had a piece of metal wire laying around. What I did is I hook it on the bolt on the back of the bushing. This way I can go ahead and take the bushing, and this just helps me to find my center point. What I can do is go ahead and fine tune and adjust, finding my center. Once I find my center point, I can go ahead and just tap it to seat it, and then go ahead and finish reinstalling the bushing. All right, now with the tool set back in, now it's in position to reinstall the bushing. You go ahead and use an open end. It's a little tight in here. So now what you want to do is you want to start working the bushing in. And now what you want to do is just follow the bushing in till it's dead center in the upper arm, and then make your way onto the next one. All right, now the next step is to go ahead and take care of the other bushing. We'll go ahead and get that disconnected now. We'll show you that as soon as we get the arm off. All right, just to keep the upper arm out of the way, just gonna go ahead and use a ratchet strap. Just because that way I can get the tool in here enough to be able to get this out of here. All right, now that you have your tool set up, you can go ahead and push out this bushing. Stick a rag over here just so it doesn't scratch everything up. Now what you can go ahead and do is pull the rear die out, just to give you some more room. This is really tight in here. And again, we're not reusing these bushings. So we're gonna go ahead and push out the rest of the bushing. Go ahead and take the tool out, get the new bushings ready. All right, now that you have the tool set back up, you can start pushing in the new bushing. Just nice and easy, nice and slow. Just take your time with it. Make sure it's going in nice and straight. If you need to readjust anything, you can. Just taking your time. I like to do sometimes is just back it off a little bit, double check just to make sure that you're centered, make sure the bushing is where it needs to be, and then go ahead and tighten it back up, work with what you have to, and then just get it set where it needs to be. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna finish tightening this up. We're gonna go ahead and put the bolts back in, lower the car down onto the ground, making sure to leave these two loose. Once there's load on the suspension, we'll reach up under the car and go ahead and tighten those up the rest of the way. And then after that, just send the car off to get in alignment. All right, now that you got everything back together, leaving the camber bolts just tight, just a little loose so that when you drop it down on the ground, after you put the tires on it, you can go ahead and tighten those up. Last thing, up underneath the car, make sure you reattach the exhaust, put the hangers back on, and then we'll go ahead and get it on the ground and see what she looks like. All right, a quick walk around of everything installed. The new bushings, springs, exhaust is tightened back up. get her on the ground and get a quick video. All right, all said and done. Just needed to go take it and get an alignment, but definitely a drastic change. Of course, the front settled down a little bit more. Once the rear settles down, and it'll be more even. But really happy with the way it turned out. I think it looks great. The camber bushings in the back definitely make a big difference as far as taking away that negative camber when you lower these Chargers and Challengers. But yeah, it turned out really, really good. We're happy with it. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Catch us on the next video.